many caregivers feel like, I can't take a break. I can't take a night off. Or if I do, it's not worth it. By the time I get back home, I'm going to be picking up so many pieces that it wasn't even worth the 1 or 2 hours that I took to go out for dinner with my husband or whatever it might be.
What does loving your neighbor actually look like? This is Journey with Care, where curious Canadians get inspired to love others well through real-life stories and honest conversations. Welcome back to Journey with Care. We are in our series, Battery Life of a Caregiver. We're exploring the lives of those who dedicate themselves to their caregiving roles. We'll uncover what it takes, their self-care strategies, and how our communities can provide much-needed support around them. Today, we are joined by our guest, Alicia Freeman. She was also a previous guest on episode 17 of this season, differently wired episode. She's a dedicated mother, foster parent, and advocate for vulnerable children. Alicia is also one of our trauma care trainers with Care Impact. But before I get Wendi to introduce our guest a little bit more, remember that we have Journey with Prayer, 5-minute Devo series to start off your week. That's on a separate feed. You can also get it on the same feed if you want. Just check the show notes and I'll have a link there for you. And you can always go to careimpact.ca/podcast to get this podcast and that one together at the same time, a little bit early. Also, this podcast exists and continues to produce great content because of the generosity of our listeners, our donors, and sponsors. To help the podcast and the work of Care Impact, we value your support and we would love to connect with new sponsors or people who just want to contribute to the podcast. You can head over to careimpact.ca/podcast. There's a donate link there, and there's a sponsor link right on that page, and we'd love to connect with you. All right, we want to get into this episode. Wendi, welcome here. You want to introduce our guest?
Absolutely. And in fact, she's no stranger to our listeners. If you've been following along, we've had her before, as mentioned. And Alicia Freeman, it's so good to have you back. You're back by popular demand. People loved listening to your story in episode 17, and I hope people will go back and if you haven't heard her story, go back there. But Alicia, when I think about caregiving, I think about you. And how's your battery life right now? Let's just check in. What's your battery at this morning?
Oh, thank you, Wendi. Thank you for welcoming me back. And as I was just telling you and Johan, as we kind of got on this morning, it's the last week of August and my battery life is pretty low. I'm ready for school to start, routines, rhythms. We all need a little bit of structure around here to get us back on track. So
I am with you, Alicia. I'm sure Wendi is too. I'm ready for school to start. So how has a typical summer day looked like in the Freeman household?
You know what? A lot of people have asked me that recently, like, what have you guys done this summer? And I kind of feel like we haven't done anything big. It's just kind of this and that. I have most of the time in my house this summer, I had a 1-year-old, a 4-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 9-year-old. So we've just been doing, swimming lessons and soccer and baseball and beach days and park days and lots of laundry and lots and lots of snacks, all day, every day eating, just those kinds of normal things. And then in the mix of that, we have some older kids who are just a little bit more in and out. So they keep us busy with their schedules as well.
So you said you're looking forward to the summer so that you have a little bit of routine back. So what does a typical school day look like for you?
Well, to be honest, and a lot of my special needs parents will resonate with this feeling of I'm so excited for school to start, but also there's a lot of unknowns about what is school going to look like and is everybody going to thrive in the places where we've kind of mapped out for them to be. And it's hard to communicate with schools through the summer, so we're still kind of waiting on those last pieces. But for the most part, I think it's going to just be me and my tiniest at home and everybody else will be off to school. So that will be new. It will give me a little bit of mental space and quiet again in my days. And so I'm looking forward to being able to just have a little bit more control over my own schedule, to be honest.
So how much does that routine of the fall, kids back in school and having that routine contribute to your battery life?
Yes. Well, I mean, I mentioned the word control, and I think lots of parents out there will probably resonate with we try to find that fine line between not trying to grasp for too much control, but at the same time feeling like everybody needs some element of control in their lives in order to feel kind of safe and grounded and feel like I know what to expect next. So I think for me, just going back into some like predictable routines where even though I know there's going to be the days where, somebody is sick or somebody needs to be picked up from school or things go wrong at school and I have to go and end up picking somebody up or having a meeting or having a difficult phone call, whatever it might be, I still know that for the most part, I can rely on they're going to get picked up by the bus at 8 o'clock in the morning and they'll be home at 3:30, and the time in between I can somewhat schedule, I can have some time, some quiet time to like focus on something that takes some mental energy, or I can, sit down and have some quiet time in the word or with prayer, or I can go for a walk with a friend without, my 4, 8, and 9-year-old interjecting all of their comments and ideas because they really love my friends too, it seems. So I'm looking forward to that.
So with the fall come a lot of those trips back and forth, many appointments I find as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do in those times when you're driving back and forth? How do you ground yourself? What do you do for self-care in the vehicle?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. My vehicle self-care. I love that because, most moms can relate to, you just spend a lot of time in the car, right? As soon as you have multiple kids, especially, there's just a lot of places to go. Like you said, appointments, like, suddenly everybody needs to go to the dentist again and the eye doctor, and there's therapy appointments and there's doctor's appointments. Something that I've noticed is that I try to pay attention when I climb into the car and, everybody's buckled in their seats and it's like, okay, we have like 5 or 10 minutes, whatever, however long the drive may be, or a longer drive. And I kind of try to just do that check-in, like, how am I feeling right now? And what do I need? Inevitably, my 9-year-old will be like, Mom, turn on my playlist. And some days his playlist is great. I'm like, okay, buddy, sure. We can do your playlist, we can rock to your tunes today. And then other times like, no, I'm sorry, buddy. We just need a quiet drive today. If I'm by myself, I end up talking to myself out loud a lot, or talking to God out loud. I pray when I'm in the car. I let it all out. I'm like, okay, God, what are you doing? I don't know what's going on, or I'm going into this meeting. I need help. Like, show me what to do. Show me what to speak. Give me the words. And deep breathing, honestly. Some deep breaths, no closing your eyes when you're driving, but some nice deep breaths just to refocus. And yeah, I like that you use the word grounding because it's actually a really great place to kind of have that moment.
I should have asked how you stay grounded in the midst of hearing Baby Shark, because I don't know if I could do that very well. But.
And this is why some days we are up for the playlist and then other days we are not up for the playlist. I love worship music too, I think I've set a pretty good precedent where it's like, okay, you can ask and it might be a yes or it might be a no. And I try to just give them a reason why. Being honest though, there are also other days where, can you turn on my playlist? I'm like, no. And that's all I can get out. I'm like, no, absolutely not. And they're like, why? I don't even have an answer. Just no. But knowing what I need as a caregiver is something that I've really tried to work on in the past couple of years. Just understanding what's going on inside of me so that I can figure out how can I get myself back to a place where I actually have the ability to care. Because the problem is when I am not grounded, when I'm not feeling okay, it's really difficult for me to offer care to the people around me as much as I want to, as much as my intentions may be good. It's really, really difficult. So.
Yeah, I know a lot of moms talk about how there's times in life where they feel they don't have anything for themselves. Like being a mom is kind of their hobby. That's their go-to. So like you talk about having worship and times of reading scripture and those things. But what about like hobbies? Are there things that give you that creative outlet for yourself?
I love that question. And again, it's something that I've been thinking about a lot the last few years because I think I went into mothering as a young woman and I had hobbies. I love to read. I have always loved to read. The last time that I had time to sit down and read a book, I don't know when that was. I still love to read, but I don't actually get to read very often. I love music. I used to spend a lot of time playing the piano, and that's not something that I do very often anymore. I love to write. I used to have a blog going. I haven't blogged for like 4 years now, I think. What I was trying to say was I went into mothering and just thinking, I had my hobbies and I was excited about mothering and just throwing myself into mothering. And now I am, 10 years in, and I'm like, whew, like all I'm doing is mothering. That's all I'm doing all the time. And I know that mothering is worth every ounce of energy that I have to give to it. However, I also know that I'm a better mom when I can remember who I am outside of being a mom, being a wife in this house, in this family, and remembering that ultimately, first of all, I'm a child of God, and He has made me uniquely and with purpose and with intention, and that's going to come out in all kinds of different ways in different seasons of my life. So right now, I think there legitimately just isn't a lot of time or energy for me to pour into other hobbies, but sometimes just taking the time to even just think about that, like, you know what, in a different season of my life, what might I like to do with my time or my energy? And how can I take just a baby step toward that? So, if I think that I'm really missing reading, this is something that over the last couple of years, it's really hard for me to sit down with a book. And a lot of moms will be able to identify with that. As soon as you sit down in a chair, everybody's there. Like, they're like, oh, mom is here. She is ready for us. She's sitting down. Great. But what I have found is that sometimes I can pop in, one earbud, probably not two, but one, while I'm busy doing the laundry or I'm cooking dinner or I'm watching the kids outside, and I can listen to an audiobook through that one earbud, and it's not going to be the same experience. Like, it's not going to be the same as when I was a teenager and I could curl up in a corner and read a book for 3 hours straight. I'm not going to get that kind of experience, but it's going to give me just a smidge of that thing that I know that I love, and it's going to fill my tank a bit. And just reassuring myself that, there's going to be a season coming again sometime soon ish, where I'm going to have time to do that again. And what can I do to make sure that I'm not just abandoning those things that I love altogether? And then just bringing my kids into things when I can too. I do love to read. And so something that I've done a lot with my kids is read alouds, where I get to read aloud. It's maybe not, my first choice of book, but I've also grown to love children's literature, like especially middle grade novels. I love them. They're so fun. And I can sit down and read those with my kids, and it's time for us together and connecting, but it's also something that I love to do. And it's sort of a way for me of reclaiming that thing that I love and that I feel like I've lost a little bit, but also not pushing aside my kids in order to do that. Because I think that's the struggle that every mom has of like, how can I make time for me and my hobbies without making my kids feel like I'm choosing my hobby over them, right? I never want them to think that me sitting down with a book is more important than me spending time with them. However, I do want them to know that realistically, sometimes mom needs time alone, and it's okay if that needs to happen sometimes too. And that good hobbies are good things, and everyone needs balance in their life, right?
Yeah. Well, except moms tend to be less balanced because they do so much for the kids and pour into them. I know I can say that just from watching my wife.
It's true. Life doesn't feel very balanced, right? And that's what, I guess when we talk about self-care and the battery life of a caregiver, I think that's an important word to think about. Is like, how can I go about intentionally bringing more balance into my life so that not all of my time and energy is being spent pouring out, and finding ways, intentional ways, to refill my own cup. And what I've loved over the past few years working with Care Impact and doing the trauma training, this fall, I'm going to be teaching a trauma care course again in Ottawa. And I'm so excited because I get to teach the full self-care module with my friend, Amy Jo. And I love teaching self-care because it's a huge part of trauma competent caregiving. And what I've learned over the past few years as I've taught that module and as I've learned from other people who are teaching that module is that rest is not always what we think it is. So caring for myself, resting, I get these images that pop into my mind when I hear those words, and they're not always accurate. So what I've learned is that finding balance and finding rest and caring for myself sometimes looks really, really different than I thought it would. And sometimes it takes time and talking with the people around you and being really intentional, praying about that, talking to my spouse and asking questions to figure out what is it that I really actually need in order to fill up my tank and care well for myself. Is it that I need to change my sleep habits? Is it that I need to spend more time outdoors? Maybe I need to change my diet. Not a fun one, but maybe that's what I really need to tackle, to care for myself well right now and have more energy, right? Or maybe it's around just like rhythms and routines. This is a really silly one, but for the past number of years, I have so much laundry in my house. We're a family of 8. And so I just feel like I'm always doing laundry. And so I made this shift where I was just like, I'm just doing like some laundry every day. So it's like, 2 or 3 loads every single day that I'm doing laundry. And for a while, that was what worked. And then at the beginning of this summer, I was like, oh, it's never, ever, ever done. And I'm so tired of doing laundry every single day. And so I decided to shift and follow what my mom used to always do. And she would always do laundry like Mondays and Fridays. So I've been trying to do that. And I don't get it all done on Monday or on Friday. But what I do is I start on Monday. I try to wrap up on Tuesday. And then I just intentionally ignore the laundry for Wednesday and Thursday. And I'm like, I'm not doing laundry these days unless, somebody puked last night and somebody wet the bed last night. So I'm doing laundry today and it's Wednesday. But for the most part, I try to give myself a break and just realize that, you know what, I'm getting really fatigued by all this laundry. Maybe I can like carve in a little intentional break for myself. So it's just about finding those things, right?
So many good things there. I mean, you mentioned trauma care, which I do want to get into. And Amy Jo is going to be our next guest on our next episode, actually. So that'll be exciting to have her on. But you mentioned how, like, even when you sit down to listen to an audiobook, how you might have a child on your lap doing something. Was that something that you had to learn on how to get your children involved in some of your own self-care routines to stay grounded? And how important do you think that is for them to see that you're getting that self-care?
Yes, I definitely feel like that was a learning curve for me. And I think it's something that a lot of parents need to hear, actually, a lot of caregivers, that do you need time alone? Absolutely. Like every caregiver needs some time alone, right? Solitude, time away from all the noise, all the social dynamics, all the overstimulation of caring for kids. But also what I've realized is that my battery life won't drain as quickly if I'm incorporating things on a regular basis during the day with my kids to care for myself. So if I know that going for a walk outside is really going to help, I can bring my kids. And you know what? A lot of the time, it's okay. Like a walk with my kids isn't always, but can be just as enjoyable as a walk all by myself. And I might still get many of the same components of that care that I'm needing. Or listening to music in the car, like sometimes when my 9-year-old says, can we turn on my playlist, Mom? And I do that self-check and realize like, hey, you know what? Some really upbeat kids music right now just might put a smile on my face too. And maybe that's exactly what I need right now. And that can care for all of us really well. So I do think that it's important to find, again, there's that word balance of making sure that I'm being intentional about carving out the space and time I need to care for myself that I need to do aside from my caregiving role. But then also trying as much as I can to incorporate self-care into my daily rhythms of care so that I'm not having to escape from the caregiving in order to care for myself. Because sometimes, as we know, it's just not possible. We go through seasons. We've been in seasons as a family where we've had both physical and mental illness in our family pretty consistently over the last 10 years, and it's not always possible. Sometimes caregiver needs to be there, and it's not always possible to escape. I know there's so many moms, especially when we talk to foster and adoptive moms and kinship caregivers. I feel like I'm narrowing that focus there, but many, many caregivers feel like I can't take a break. I can't take a night off, or if I do, it's not worth it. By the time I get back home, I'm going to be picking up so many pieces that it wasn't even worth the 1 or 2 hours that I took to go out for dinner with my husband or whatever it might be. I get that. I get that. And there are seasons where you're absolutely right. It's not actually going to fill your tank the way something else might. So I think it's about getting creative, right? Figuring out, what do I need and how can I get that in a way that is actually going to leave me feeling cared for and feeling filled up, I guess. And sometimes leaving home and leaving our kids creates more anxiety and more trauma and more chaos than is worth what might seem like the benefits of it. There is always a way that we can find to care for ourselves. It just may take some creative thinking and some planning and some intentionality. And I think it's great for our kids to see that. We went through a long season where one night of the week was always mom's night off in our house. And my husband really gifted that with me for a season. And it hasn't worked. We haven't been doing that for 10 years straight. We just did that for a season. We did that for a number of years where it was possible. And then suddenly it wasn't working anymore. But that was something that my kids just got used to. They got used to, like, oh, it's Monday. It's mom's night off. After dinner, mom disappears for a little while. I could just go. I could choose what I was going to do in that time to kind of fill myself up. Sometimes it was 30 minutes. Sometimes it was 3 hours. It wasn't always the same depending on what was going on in the house. But I had that little snippet of time. But that took planning. It took communication between my husband and I. It took, identifying what are my needs and what is feasible for all of us. Most caregivers aren't caring for those they care for alone. So it often takes communication with the other caregiver, whether it's a spouse or whether it's even grandparents or whoever else might be in your village, to figure out how can we work together to make sure that everybody is not just surviving, but thriving. That's our goal, right?
Yeah, you already answered one of the questions I was going to ask you about your husband. I mean, if our listeners listen to your previous episode, you guys went through some pretty stressful times, even in the last year or so. So what are some other ways that you and your husband have supported each other in maintaining your own mental and emotional well-being?
I love that question because I love to talk about my husband and the way that we've found to care for each other well and care for our kids well together.
And your marriage, right?
And our marriage, exactly. And so often we remind ourselves of this regularly. We, on the really stressful, chaotic days, we will just look at each other and be like, one day it's just going to be the two of us again. And we are so excited for that. And it's okay to be excited for that. It's okay to be excited that one day your kids are going to grow up and, if all goes as planned, they're going to be able to be independent. That doesn't always look the same. We have some kids that we expect much more independence from than others in our household, but it's not always going to be like this. And similar to what I was saying before, it's important to recognize that this is a season, right? This is a season of our lives. And how can we make sure that we're investing for the next season that's coming as well? I don't want to end up as empty nesters and look at each other and be like, who are you? I don't know you. And where have you been this whole time? I married my husband because he's my best friend and because I adore him. And I never want to forget that. I don't want to forget that in the middle of the busy and the chaotic. I don't want to forget that this is my person. This is who I've chosen to do life with. So we try to carve out, time, not just time together, but also time to have fun together, making sure that we're laughing together, making sure that we're dreaming together about the future and that next season that's coming. And probably one of the biggest things that we've learned over the last few years, because you're right, it's been a really difficult season for our family for, I want to say, like 4 years now. Just a lot going on, and we're still in the thick of it. It just feels like it doesn't end, right? There's just a lot to cope with. There's a lot to process, and I'm just so glad I'm not doing it alone. I'm glad that I have a partner beside me who is committed to doing this with me. And what we're learning is how to work off each other's strengths and identify each other's strengths at any given time. So when we're thrown into chaos, or crisis mode, to be able to look at each other and kind of have that check-in of like, where are you at and how much do you got? And some days, it's like, you know what? I got this. If you can keep everybody else occupied, I can handle this crisis here. or I can make that hard phone call, or I can go and do the pickup. Or 2 days ago, my husband spent all night in the emergency room and he was like, it's okay. I got this. I got this. You go to bed, you sleep so that you can take care of everybody else tomorrow. I will be in emerge all night tonight and I'm okay. And he did that and he spent all night in emerge and then he drove straight to work and worked all day. He's incredible. But I knew then that on the flip side, coming out of that, obviously by the next night, then it was my turn, right? So to be able to work off of what our natural strengths are, but then also at any given time, just realizing like, you know, I've already had a chaotic week and I'm at the bottom of the barrel. I've got nothing left to give. I think what we've learned is to be able to communicate that to each other and just be honest about like, you know what, I'm really struggling. Like I need some help here. And more often than not, and I don't know if this is just, you know, God's grace or whether it's hearing your partner identify so clearly, like, you know what, I need help. I need you. How can we do this together? Usually there's one of us who can say, okay, you know what, I hear you. It's okay. I've got this. You go, you take a break or you rest or whatever it might be.
Now, our previous episode, we talked about how your church community and those surrounding you can kind of be a support to you. I want to get right back into this marriage conversation because I think it's such a big piece of self-care when you have a spouse, that marriage care is really self-care. Because
Yes.
like you said, children are only with you for a season, but your spouse is forever. And you want to make sure that you're healthy throughout that. And it's also going to give you a healthier household if your marriage is healthy and your kids are going to be happier. So what can the community around you, the church community, do to help support you guys as a couple in the midst of being caregivers with 6 children and a household? How can the church surround you guys as a couple to support your marriage even?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to my mind is just, you know, being surrounded by a lot of other people who also value their marriages. I think that's something important that we've found in our church community is we're surrounded by other people who are also going through life, raising kids, dealing with crises, challenges that come up, and we see other people around us valuing their marriage and making sure that they're being intentional about taking the time to invest in each other and invest in their relationship. So that's encouraging just to see that in people around us and have that influence. So that's been powerful. And then, I mean, just practically, you know, making space to prioritize things like date nights and, you know, time away when we do need it. We do try to take some time away at least whether it's once a year or once every other year, to go away for the weekend. And then just on a weekly basis, we've tried to be really intentional about making date nights a priority. We do not go out once a week, to be clear. That's not what date night weekly looks like, because that wouldn't be feasible, right? We don't, even with our wonderful community, that is a way that they can and have and do offer support, but we haven't had anybody consistently in our lives the past 10 years who's willing to babysit once a week. So if you find somebody like that, that's incredible. And that's quite an investment. And I mean, if you're listening to this and you're especially, you know, a young adult, or maybe you're a couple who you don't have kids of your own, or your kids are grown, and that's something that you'd be willing to do, I can guarantee that that's something that would be really beneficial to a family who's in the midst of caregiving and just in that hustle and bustle and chaos of life. It's important to spend time alone, and it can be really hard and just hard to ask people. I think that's another thing that I've had to get past, is realizing that people really do want to be helpful and they want to be supportive, but oftentimes they don't know what to offer. And sometimes we just have to be brave enough to ask, and making sure that we're finding those safe people who we know they'll say no if they can't do it, right? Because that takes the pressure off of me that maybe somebody's resentfully caring for me, right? But if we have those people in our life where we know that they're going to be honest with us and say, no, I'm so sorry. Like, this is a really crazy week for me. I can't do that. Okay, that's totally fine. Just checking. We'll try you again another time. Just having those kinds of conversations, I think, is really great.
So if there's listeners that actually know you and are listening to this conversation, maybe just go buy a nice gift card for you guys to go for dinner and then offer to watch the kids. So that's a good way to, like, offering help is probably huge because you feel like you don't want to ask for help all the time, especially when
Yeah.
it feels like it might be a burden of 6 kids to put on someone else, right? So I
Yes.
think one way for the community to come around a couple like you and support your marriage and support your family is just to offer help and to come with an idea already, because you're not necessarily thinking about things that you could do together, but saying, here's a gift card, I want you to go out and we're going to watch your kids on this night. That would probably be a huge thing. I'm just throwing that in there if there's some listeners that happen to know Alicia. So
I love that. And it's some, as you were saying that, I would love to just share, like, there's a few instances that pop into my mind. I mean, right now, while I'm sitting here doing this podcast recording, my friend is watching some of my kids, and this friend has been absolutely incredible. She started out, she was in high school and she started babysitting for us for a summer. She did do that, like weekly, pretty much weekly date night so that we could get out. She started, that was years and years ago. Now she's a young adult. She has a busy life of her own, but she comes back to her hometown for the summers, for at least, periods of the summer. And every time she's home, she's checking in and she's saying, "Hey, how can I help? What can I do? Let's hang out this week. Let's connect." And I know that she's always willing to spend time with my kids and invest in them. And she'll offer a date night, and that means the world to me. And she's a young adult. There are so many things that she could be doing with her time and her energy, but she's chosen to invest in us, and it's made a huge difference. We love her so much, and we're so grateful for her. Another thing that pops into my mind is just the random offers, like you said, when people just offer to help. There was recently a weekend where we were just falling apart at the pieces, and I had a friend come up to us and was just like, "Hey, can I take 2 of your kids this afternoon? Can they come over and play?" And they didn't even know what was going on, but it just felt like God was like, "I see you, and here are your people, and it's going to be okay. You don't have to do this alone." And then absolutely our family. We are surrounded by an incredible extended family who are just always willing to be supportive. And we know that they will be honest. I know that when I call my mother-in-law for like the 5th time of the week, and I'm like, "I'm so sorry. I know you already spent so much time with your grandchildren this week, but do you want one more hour?" She will be honest with me and she'll say, like, "You know what? I need a down day. So not today." And that's what I need, right? I need to know that people will be honest with me so that I don't have to worry that when I'm asking, because I probably don't want to be asking, but I feel like I have to ask, that they'll be honest and they will let me know.
we haven't talked about really preventative things. I mean, you're pretty good at self-care because you've done the trauma care training and it talks a lot about that. But what are some of the signs that you know that you're on the verge of burnout, and what kind of things can you do to mitigate getting to that point?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you say I'm pretty good at this. I don't know, Johan.
You have the information as a
Yes.
trauma care trainer, right? So
Yes, I do have the
yes.
information. And so now maybe, yes, possibly I recognize I'd like to think I recognize the signs a little bit sooner than I did longer ago. But definitely for me, and I think for a lot of caregivers, it's, when you start to see things like I'm waking up at 2 a.m. pretty regularly and my brain can't stop spinning and I can't go back to sleep for like 2 hours because I'm worrying that we're not going to be okay. I'm not going to make it through the next week or the next day, or, trying to problem solve the next year in your mind, because at 2 a.m., I don't know, things just go haywire, right? It's not a good time for processing, but we try anyway, things like that, or just constant exhaustion, irritability. I had a day recently where I woke up and I just felt irritated at the world. And as I recognized that, I was able to stop and, with some curiosity, try to think about, okay, what is going on inside of me right now? Which reminds me, I have a little tip to offer. There is an app. It's called How We Feel, and I love it. It's absolutely wonderful. You just download it on your phone, Android or iPhone, and it sends me notifications throughout the day. So it kind of reminds me, like, just checking in how you're feeling. And so you click on the app and it starts off with 4 different categories. So you can choose from high energy or low energy. And there's kind of the low energy positive and low energy negative, and then high energy positive or high energy negative. What I love about those 4 options is that usually I can identify, okay, am I high energy or low energy? And am I feeling like okay or not okay? And then from there, once you tap on one of those options, it gives you a whole bunch of words to choose from to try to identify how you're feeling. And that might sound hilarious. Like a number of years ago, if you would have asked me, like, do you know how you're feeling most of the time? I would have said, oh, for sure. Absolutely. Yes. I'm like emotionally intelligent. I know what's going on inside of me. I understand how I feel. But what I've realized over the last number of years is that I actually don't know what I'm feeling most of the time. And so how can I problem solve and be creative about caring for myself when I don't even know how to diagnose the problem or what's going on? And so I love this app for that. You can click on the little bubbles that show the words and it will give you a little description, and you would not believe how many times I'm just kind of like tapping through going like, no, that's not quite it. No, that's not quite it. And then I find when I'm like, yes, that's it. Okay, I know how I'm feeling. And just the relief that I find in being able to identify, okay, I know what's going on inside of me, usually following up, then I can figure out, okay, what do I need? Or is this just a wonderful moment to celebrate, right? Obviously, this is a great idea to use this app when you're having really positive feelings as well, and to be able to just celebrate that and take some time to have a worship moment and praise God and say, you know what, thank you so much for this moment. We are having a good day, or this has been a great hour for me. I feel so much peace or so much joy or just that abundance of gratitude right now. And I'm thankful for that, and to just live in that moment for a bit. But if things are rocky or hard, or there's sadness, there's grief, there's overwhelm, there's overstimulation, so many different things going on, to be able to realize like, okay, how can I make a little shift and get back to a space where I'm going to be able to offer care to all these people who are coming to me and looking to me to meet their needs.
So the How We Feel app, not a sponsor, should be.
Yes.
I'll throw that in the show notes for people that want to pick that up. But
Awesome.
as a trauma care trainer, and many of our listeners haven't taken this trauma care training, how much has that helped you in self-care, even learning about the children that you care for and the trauma that they've gone through? What's your pitch on people taking the trauma care course to get better at self-care?
Yes. Well, I think this has been a huge part of self-care for me. I think early on, and if you listen to the last episode that I was on, I kind of tell the story of what brought my husband and I to trauma care. But as we started learning about how trauma has impacted many of the kids in our home, and also how trauma has impacted ourselves, that came a little bit later, I started to be able to peel off some of those layers of guilt and of anxiety and overwhelm, because I really didn't know what was going on. And similar to what we just talked about, where, knowing how I'm feeling can help me to kind of diagnose the situation and figure out how to move forward. It's the same with my kids. When I understand a little bit more about how trauma has impacted them, I can sort of diagnose what's going on and realize like, okay, there are impacts here that are completely out of my control. I didn't cause this, and there's nothing I can do to go back and fix it. But what I can do is I can move forward with the knowledge of what's going on. And oftentimes my way forward is going to look different with an understanding of where we're truly at. Again, similar to my own emotions, right? If I think I'm just angry, then I might have a lot of interesting ways of trying to solve that. But if I understand that I'm angry, but my anger is masking grief or anxiety, then it's going to look different in the way that I move forward. And it's the same thing with my kids. I still struggle. I think every mom does. I still struggle with a lot of guilt, a lot of should haves, would haves, wanting to be perfect and wrestling with my own capacity limits and my own weaknesses, my own challenges, my own vicarious trauma. But the knowledge and the understanding really does pave a way toward freedom and healing that is just beautiful. And I'm so thankful that self-care is a part of this course. It comes right at the end. It's the last module of the course, which I love because, we've learned all these things and then we wrap it up with self-care. But at Care Impact, we've also been having a lot of conversations about how do we make sure that we bring this in sooner? And so this fall, when I'm teaching, we're actually going to talk about it on the first day already. We're going to talk about impacts, and then we're going to go right ahead and talk about self-care. So I'm interested to see kind of how that plays out and how that feels. We'd like to think that as caregivers, we're fine, right? We're fine. We're always fine. We can do it, especially if you equip us with all this knowledge. We'll be fine.
There's the other F word, right? Yeah.
Yes, the F word. But we're not fine. That so many of us are not okay. And until we start to get real about that and we start to figure out how to move ourselves toward a healthier place, we're not going to be able to care well, especially all these strategies. So something interesting that I've found as I've started learning more about trauma care is that as long as I'm in the material and I'm regularly refreshing myself on the strategies and the why behind it and the understanding, I find it's very helpful. However, if I take too long of a break, this is maybe just me, but if I take too long of a break, things start to get a little bit fuzzy. Often what happens is, I guess this is probably honestly the enemy. It's he takes that knowledge and he uses it against me, right? Because he's like, oh my goodness, you're a trauma care trainer. You should know better than this. You should be doing things this way. Look at, there's 10 strategies listed out here for you and you're not doing any of them. What are you doing? That you're a failure. All these lies from the enemy. But as long as I am in that material and actually getting it in context, there's so much about the why. And there's so much about the practical how to do this. And there's so much compassion for the caregiver. And I love that. Our whole team at Care Impact is passionate about compassion for caregivers. Because if we're not compassionate toward ourselves, there's no way we're going to be able to be compassionate for those that we're caring for. The vulnerable people around us, they're not going to get that compassion if we're not practicing it on ourselves as well.
Which is why trauma care is so much more effective in the midst of communities that are all trained in it, right?
Yes.
I mean, you're not going to forget it as easily when everybody's practicing it on a regular basis. So that's something that we really strive for, to see the church trained and equipped in trauma care. So you listeners, if you're looking for it, Care Impact does offer it in many places. Alicia's doing a training in October in Ottawa. So we're excited about that. And there's always going to be more. There's some online options as well. So we're coming to the end of our time here. It's just flying by. So before we finish here, though, I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to give some practical tips or advice that you might have. I'll give you the last word here, Alicia.
Thank you, Johan. Yeah, when I just think about practical self-care, there's so many things that come to mind. The top of the list right now for me, because this is something that I've really been investing in lately, is therapy. Therapy for yourself as a caregiver. I know that's not an option for everybody, but if it's even remotely an option, I would encourage you to seek out professional counselor or therapist who can help you walk through your own big feelings. We mentioned vicarious trauma just briefly. When we walk with others who have hard stories, foster care brings a lot of trauma, a lot of grief, a lot of loss. It's just hard. I've had to sit through some really graphic details of hard stories, and it changes you. It shifts things inside of you. And there are some things that are really hard to forget and really hard to set down. And many of us as caregivers have been in situations that we never, ever dreamt that we would ever be in, and had to make very hard decisions that just, they do. They keep us awake at 2 a.m. with all the ifs, ands, and should haves, and what could I have done differently, and how did things possibly come to this? I must be doing something horribly wrong. It's been really important for me to spend time caring for myself by seeking out that professional who can help me walk through what's going on inside of me. How can I develop good habits in my own life? And just giving me a space to talk, to let it all out with no guilt. I'm not trying to care for my therapist. She's not my friend. She's not my spouse. She's not my child. She's not a relative. She's just my therapist. And her only job is to sit there and to listen to me and reflect back to me. This is what I'm hearing you say. What do you think about this? And to help me come up with strategies for me, for my personal life. I feel like, I spend so much time investing and advocating for my kids and how to help them be healthier, but I need somebody to invest in me too. And that's where therapy comes in for me. I've also done biblical counseling in the past, and that was wonderful perspective. Just depending on where you're at, what you're experiencing in your brain and your body and your emotions and your beliefs, I think that will shift in which direction you might want to go in that frame. And then, we've talked about marriage a lot. That's important as far as just personal ways of caring for myself. I know that I need time in nature. I need time to be outside. I love the quote that says, nature right sizes our world. We go outside and suddenly we are so small, and our problems become smaller and our perspective shifts. That's important for me, and I know it is for a lot of people. We love to go camping. So in the summertime, that's always an important part of our summer. We go for a couple weekends, we go camping. We live by Georgian Bay, so we go out on the bay. We get like a crownland spot. It's beautiful. It's absolutely breathtaking out there. Just being surrounded by giant skies and forests and water. It's very therapeutic for me. And I just find it gives me a chance to just breathe, I guess. Deep breathing is just one of those practical, my kids tell me all the time, it doesn't work for me, Mom. But I promise you, keep trying with your kids and keep trying with yourself. Like, it's scientifically proven when we can just learn how to breathe properly and relax the muscles in our neck, in our shoulders, our facial muscles, all the way down to the soles of our feet. It can change how we're able to think, how we're able to process, just to be able to bring some clarity to those moments when we're overwhelmed and overstimulated. Journaling, mindfulness, I know that's kind of a hot topic word right now in society, but mindfulness is just paying attention to where you are right now and what's going on in this moment. And again, I think it's such a biblical practice to just slow down and just realize, like, there are so many things that I'm worrying about and anxious about that are out of my control. There's nothing I can do about them. But what I can do is make good choices right now in this moment. And I can notice what's around me. I can practice gratitude for the things that are beautiful and good in this world.
And the beautiful thing is, as Christians, we can ask our Creator how He thinks of us as His created beings. And that's part of mindfulness as believers, I believe.
Yes.
Thank you so much for so many beautiful insights and another great conversation. Thanks for coming on, Alicia.
Thanks for having me back. I loved it.
Thank you for joining another conversation on Journey with Care, where we inspire curious Canadians on their path of faith and living life with purpose in community. Journey with Care is an initiative of Care Impact, a Canadian charity dedicated to connecting and equipping the whole church to journey well in community. You can visit their website at careimpact.ca or visit journeywithcare.ca to get more information on weekly episodes, Journey with Prayer, and details about our upcoming events and meetups. You can also leave us a message, share your thoughts, and connect with like-minded individuals who are on their own journeys of faith and purpose. Thank you for sharing this podcast and helping these stories reach the community. Together we can explore ways to journey in a good way. And always remember to stay curious.